And it turns out they gave this young researcher, Ted Fosis, they gave him a crate of old urine samples from women that they didn't want to use anymore. And they're like, here, this is your project. Go figure out something interesting to do with it. So he looked into urine and he found the estrogen, right? Because these are women. Mm-hmm. And what he found, though, when he was analyzing the urine, there was this weird spike that came out of the urine that he'd never seen before. In fact, nobody had actually seen it before. So in the lab, he cut the spike out. This is how you do it. You cut the spike out and you analyze what is the spike. That spike was a natural compound from soy called genistein. And so his lab basically said, so what? You know, because it didn't come from humans. Don't forget, this lab was studying human estrogen. And so he found this weird estrogen-like spike out of women. They cut it out. And they said, well, it didn't come from humans. It didn't come from the women. Where did it come from? It came from soy. So, and they're like, well, tell us that it's useful or don't tell us at all. All right. And so what he did is he actually studied the genistein, which is a phytoestrogen, a plant estrogen, which came from soy. All right. And this is one of the origins to how the whole urban legend about soy being damaging came from, phytoestrogens. And he tested it in the systems used for drug development, ultimately, to see if you can starve cancer. And when he dropped the soy genistein in there, other things that are out there in the blogosphere, in the social media space, and the rumor mill, I think most urban legends on health come from well-intentioned people who are trying to put one and one together. And somebody heard that some human breast cancers are estrogen sensitive, and they are. And then that same person also read somewhere that soybeans have something called a phytoestrogen, and didn't think about the phyto part, just thought about the estrogen part. And again, well-intentioned, saying, well, in that case, you don't want to put any estrogen from soy into the woman. And that's where this took off, like this whole idea that women shouldn't eat soy. But unfortunately, they were wrong because they weren't scientists and they didn't know the data. So this is where, by the way, I think for anybody listening, having partial knowledge really requires you to keep looking for more information and not just take the halfway mark and say, I'm done, I'm the expert. When I was talking about this earlier in my career, they'd say, you know, that's a nice theory, Dr. Lee, but look, I'm a woman, I'm not going to take the chance. All right.
Right.
Well, so what I say is let's look at where the rubber meets the road in people. Let's look at real women with real clinical trials that had only women in it, right? Women with breast cancer. And one of the most famous ones that I talk about is it's the Shanghai Women's Breast Cancer Study, where they studied 5,000 women who were at the highest risk for breast cancer. And you know why they were at the highest risk? Because they already had breast cancer, right? They're at super high risk. And here's what they found. They found that the women who ate more soy had lower mortality. And it's fine. I think anybody wanting to have an intelligent conversation got to be open-minded. Ask questions. I always tell people to ask questions. They're like, okay, well, that's one study, even though there's 5,000 people in it, you know, has it been repeated? And what I say is that actually, it's a great question because there are 14 other studies that have come out since. And in 14 clinical trials involving women only with breast cancer, in every single study looking at soy intake and breast cancer outcomes, eating soy led to less mortality. And in every study, eating soy led to greater survival. Tomatoes. Let's throw out the myth about nightshades and lectins. All right. Tree nuts, walnuts, pistachios, almonds, macadamias, pine nuts. They also lower the risk, and they can also cut off the blood supply of cancer. We're also talking about the brassica vegetable family.
Yes.
So we're talking about not just broccoli, the regular broccoli. We're talking about even turnips, which are part of the brassica family, all have sulforaphanes that cut off the blood supply feeding cancer. Berries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. Strawberries have something called ellagic acid, cuts off the blood supply to tumors. This is all based on actually research I did years ago with the National Cancer Institute, where we were studying things to cut off the blood supply for breast and other cancers with drugs. And when we threw a strawberry extract in there, boom, like we got a score. We hit a home run.
That's crazy.
And so
Wow.
these are not replacements for your doctor, your oncologist, and not for drug therapy or women's health specialists. But these are things that you can do for yourself. That's part of health care. You go to the doctor for sick care. All right. That's how our system is set up. When you go home from the doctor's office, then it switches over to healthcare. We take care of ourselves. This is how the food in our own toolbox for ourselves. Green tea cuts off the blood supply to breast cancer. And by the way, matcha, which is the specific kind of green tea is good for you. And green tea, when you steep a cup of green tea, the polyphenols, the catechins that are naturally present in tea leaves float out because of the hot water into the brew. And then you're sipping the brew and you're actually getting the catechins, the polyphenols in your body. They cut off the blood supply to cancer. All right. That's very, very clear. Now, but you don't get all the catechins out of the tea leaves because, well, you're just soaking. There's still some left. You know how in a sponge, if you just put a sponge in a bucket and fill up the bucket, even if you empty out the water, the sponge is still going to have some stuff in it, some water in it. You got to squeeze it out, right? So nobody squeezes out all the catechins from their tea leaves when you brew a cup of tea. However, there is something different about matcha. Matcha is green tea, regular green tea, except about 28 days before they harvest it, they put a shade over it, and that actually causes more polyphenols to be produced. So all by itself, there's more polyphenols, more catechins in matcha, just by putting a little covering over it. Then when they harvest it very carefully. Then they, unlike regular tea, which is just drying the tea leaves, here and then selling it. Here, they dry the tea leaves, the whole leaf, and then they pulverize it into a fine powder. So now you get 100% of the polyphenols in the tea leaf in matcha. Matcha, and this was based on research done by scientists in England. They found that matcha can actually kill breast cancer stem cells. So stem cell, listen, we're all made of stem cells. Like when our dad's sperm met our mom's egg, we're a little ball of cells. Our stem cells are what allowed us to grow a face, ears, heart, lung, fingertips, toenails. All right. So we were all formed out of stem cells. But when we were actually formed and born, all the other stem cells got stored away to repair and regenerate ourselves over the course of our lives when we need to. Now, when cancers form, that mutation, where you got the bad guy forming, if it turns into a tumor, that 1 centimeter tumor, a billion cancer cells, a 1 centimeter cancer, the smallest one you can feel, a billion cancer cells in it, is already fed by 100 million blood vessel cells. Let's stop those blood vessels from forming. Let's shore up the immune system. These are simple steps that can actually be taken by healthy people. And if you have cancer, now's the time to, hubba and get with it, because this is not something your oncologist is going to be doing for you. This is something you're going to be doing for yourself. And then the researchers that found that, you see, what happens is that after you completely treat breast cancer, right, the women who are in remission, thank God I'm in remission, right, the 5-year mark. Unfortunately, about 20% of people who are in remission over 5 years comes back. Where the heck did that come from? How did that cancer come back? Well, it turns out that cancers also develop stem cells, and they can renew themselves. Now, we know this occurs in breast and other cancers. We don't have a medicine that can treat cancer stem cells. There's nothing. I mean, I can tell you, as somebody who's doing therapeutic development for cancer, we ain't got nothing for that. Certain bacteria in the gut, and you can eat these bacteria, and the bacteria are also found in food, but you can get it as a probiotic. And one of them is called lactobacillus reuteri, hormone. It's the hormone that when the 1 minute old infant is given skin time and starts to suckle on the nipple, it releases oxytocin, releases the milk letdown. Oxytocin is also important for uterine contractions when you're delivering the baby, and also oxytocin is important for social connection. So when you're at the airport or at the train station or the bus station and you haven't seen a relative in a long time or a good friend, and they come through the arrivals area and you run up there and you give them a great hug and you're really just happy to see them, your brain is flooded with oxytocin. Oxytocin also comes out of your brain when you get a kiss. And I'm not talking about grandma's peck on the cheek. In the lab, lactobacillus reuteri, when fed in the lab to animals, just through their drinking water, like you ever had a hamster or gerbil and you got to put the water bottle up with the little metal nozzle and the animal goes up there and starts licking it? If that's all you do is you put the lactobacillus reuteri powder into the water, mix it all up, shake it all up, and let them drink it. No biggie. If these animals were prone to develop breast cancer, guess what? It would reduce the size and reduce